Ladies and gentlemen, a deep and dream-filled slumber. A Fool's Guide to the Arabian Nights. Part 1. Don't start something you can't finish. On the other hand, there's no end to it. It was an ancient, undemocratic time, when myths were more real than reality itself. What was reality but a myth? The more you missed it, the more real it became. A time when veils were lifted, only to reveal another veil. The masquerade of living in a world where everything and nothing was equally implausibly possible and possibly implausible impossible. When science was magic, and magic needed no further explanation. The world simply a miraculous thing, and living but a journey through wonderland, through the looking glass, down the rabbit hole. To bring it back up to basics was the work of dispirited underminers, hacking away in the darkness at solid rocks in a vain attempt to bring light to a world already ablaze with wonders. A time of beginnings that never ended, and endings that always began again. Another tale, another myth not to be missed. Otherwise, we would never have really lived at all. A wise fool once said, "Whoever splits a seed and finds nothing inside is failing to experience the spirit at the heart of everything." If we can't release the genie from the bottle in this bottled-up world, we're doomed to remain afraid of nothing, really. Fear is the demon's tool to incite compliance with our own damnation, forever trapped in an unbreakable bottle. Imaginative calisthenics, our only hope for a healthy mind and body, and a spirit that's free to roam through all eternity with a wide open-mindedness that it is really only the particular that will finally pass. To deal only in particulars is one way to lose one's meaning and purpose in life. So how should we begin? How else could a fool begin but with a moment of foolish revelation? A king discovers his queen fornicating with his pot washer under the kitchen table. He's shocked, he's stunned, he's furious. He feels like a fool made to look like an idiot, and driven by his foolishly idiotic demons, he drags them both by the heels upstairs and flings them unceremoniously over the parapet. Hey, he's not a fool, he's not an idiot, he's a king, and it's his parapet. Of course, when he unfoolishly calms down, he's plunged into a deep depression. He can't eat, he can't sleep. His palace, his gardens, his jewels and spices, his servants and slaves, no longer any comfort. King Shazam sulks in his room for days. Finally, he decides to go visit his older brother for advice. King Shira, who is king of the whole world, not just some minor backwatered kingdom. He always was his father's favourite, but no sooner had Shazam entered his brother's super-gorgeous palace and seen him standing next to his super-gilded throne, so tall, at least 5'8". Shazam was barely 5'3" in his stocking feet. His brother so utterly resplendent and self-assured. Poor Shazam felt too embarrassed and humiliated to say anything but that his wife had suddenly and tragically died, and he really needed a break. No mention of the pot washer. King Shira sympathetically insists his little brother can make himself at home, stay as long as he likes. So in the morning, he himself is going on a hunting trip. He'd been planning it for months. Of course, Shazam is welcome to come along. 2 weeks in the mountains with the boys may be just what the doctor ordered. Shazam declines that offer. He's just not up to killing more wildlife yet. So the following morning, King Shira sets off with his hunting party. Shazam mopes around in an upstairs annex overlooking the Queen's recreation area, his brother's wife, and he sees the beautiful young Queen enter with her retinue, 20 serving maids who suddenly rip all their clothes off, and he realizes 10 of them are not even women, never mind maids, though they all seem very willing to service each other, as the Queen gives a little whistle. And the strapping young bucko in loincloth and a big willing grin leaps down from an overhanging palm tree, and he and the Queen vigorously join in the orgiastics. Well, Shazam is stunned. He's shocked. He can't believe his gaping eyes. Apparently, his big brother is paddling his own barrel blindly up the same marital Craps Creek, but somehow that makes him feel better about himself, and that night he gets very drunk, eats a lot of beef crackling. And he's still very drunk next morning, when his big brother returns unexpectedly, forgotten to pack a spare pair of socks, only to find his little brother dancing naked on the kitchen table, his perked up beyond recognition. And now Shazam has no problem telling Big Bro about his slutty Queen and the pot washer. He had to throw them both over the parapet. What else could a poor cuckolded king do? Shura sympathizes, but suspects there may be more to Shazam's sudden ecstatics than finally coming to terms with royal humiliation. Trust me, bro, says Shazam, you do not want to know. But I'm the king of the whole world, says Shura. I need to know everything. Well, it's your funeral. Follow me. Shazam leads his brother upstairs to the annex. And sure enough, there's his missus, who assumes her hubby's still off mounting his kingdom with his little bow and arrow, while she is humptying a dumpty with one of the king's men. Well, King Shazar is shocked. He's stunned. He's absolutely furious. He orders the whole orgiastic caboodle to be immediately decapitated. Especially his Queen, though. What's so special about losing your head when everybody else is losing theirs too? Can't chop it off twice. Maybe he didn't let her brush her hair first. Merciless. She thanks Allah there were no cameras around. Her last words, vive la tête and my right to privacy. Then something happened. Something happened Shura would never forget, so long as he remembered it. The king of the world has been thrown for an unruler-like loop. He starts to think there may be more to this world than he ever dared imagine. He convinces his brother to join him for walkabout, dressed as beggars, so nobody will show them any special favours. They will experience the world as it really is, not how he'd foolishly imagined it. And it was an eye-opener and a very tough slog for beggars. Anyway, one day, they're sitting at the seaside on the shore of some distant land, wondering if there's still something they might have missed, when they see what seems to be a very low-lying dark cloud moving unnaturally towards them. But it's not a cloud at all. It's a giant demon in a long black cloak. They hide behind the nearest sand dune. As the demon strides up onto the beach, settles down on the pebbles, his legs stretched out into the waves towards the horizon, he unlocks this glass case he's carrying, and a beautiful young woman, all in white lace, pops out, his bride for all reasons. She nestles beside him, and he lays his head monstrously in her lap, then falls into a deep, undemonic slumber, as this vision of loveliness sweetly strokes his overflowing curly cues. The brothers try to creep away, but the young woman sees them and calls out seductively, "Psst, psst, fancy a shot of the jackpot, I'm in the mood for love." Shazam and Shura hesitate, suspecting this demon could very easily become the devil himself should he suddenly wake up and find himself romantically backslided. But the young woman is insistent. "If you don't do my bidding," she coos, or scream, wake him up, and he's always angry after a nap. Well, the two brothers have no choice but to do her bidding. After she's bidden herself out, she demands they give her their wedding rings, which they kept on just in case beggary became absolutely unbearable, and to remind them not to hang out with women. She pops them into a little box with the other 98 to make a tidy 100. Now, if I were you, I'd bugger off as fast as you can. They don't need telling twice, they run off, but as they run off, they sneak a peek back and they see this vision of loveliness all in readjusted white lace, sweetly resettling this monstrosity back in her lap, gazing innocently off into the ocean sunset. Like for all the world, she's posing for a picture postcard you'd be happy to send home to your granny and grandad. The kings returned to their separate palaces, a lot less naive about the workings of the world. I mean, if women can deceive what might have been the devil himself, what should they have to complain about? The younger brother vows to have no more of female company, hires himself a handsome young pot washer, don't ask, don't tell. But the older brother wasn't giving up on women so easily. He decides to ravish a different young virgin every night because he no longer wants to be poking his nose into anybody else's business. And then the following morning he chops their heads off because he doesn't want anybody poking their nose into his business. Hey, he's the king of the whole world. Let's have some respect. Of course, he doesn't chop their heads off himself. Doesn't want any blood on his hands that isn't decently respectable wildlife. So he has his vizier appoint an axeman to do it. Every king has a vizier, a guy who outviziers him and oversees everything the king may be blindly missing. Of course, they didn't see what was happening under the kitchen table or in the rec room, or if they did, they wisely kept it below their belt. And every vizier had an axeman. So anyway, the cherry pluckings and the decapitations continued apace, virginity being decimated. Needless to say, a lot of people thought he was going a bit over the top, but nobody knew how to stop it, short of starting a war, which isn't easy if you don't have an army. Besides, that would just be propagating a vicious cycle, and most people were neither viziers nor cyclists. Finally, there's one young woman decides enough is enough. The vizier's daughter, Scheherazade, she had a plan, though not so much a plan as a notion. Not so much a notion as a desperate realization. Pretty soon she'd be up for grabs herself, because they were rapidly running out of local virgins. To her father's horror, she offers herself up as the next sacrificial sex object. She persuades her dad to vouch for her maidenhood, as if fathers really knew what was going on with their daughters, and that night she turns up in the king's bedchamber, and he gets to have his regal way with her. Afterwards, they're lying there post-coital. He's readjusting his crown when she says quite apropos, "Hey, sire, did you ever hear the one about the salesman and the old devil?" He hadn't. But after his recent run-in with the demon by the ocean, his curiosity has piqued. And when his curiosity piques, the pussy decides to play possum. "Oh, no, I'm too tired. It's been a long day. Forget it. I'll tell you tomorrow." And with that, she rolls over onto her side and feigns a deep slumber. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You won't be here tomorrow. I want to hear about the salesman and the old devil. Do you know something I don't know? But it was no use. The unvirginized daughter has vanished off into the land of Noddy and Big Ears. No matter how much he royally shook her, the poor king was left utterly suspended. He couldn't sleep. He had to take a sedative. Next morning, he decides, okay, I'm not going to chop your head off today, not till you've told me about the salesman and the old devil. So that night, after a perfunctory ravishing, she did. And thus began the first of 1001 predictive programmings to keep a royal serial killer's disbelief indefinitely suspended. See you next week, ladies and gentlemen, when a salesman makes his pitch and an old devil refuses to buy it wholesale.